Hi, friends. I'm so excited about today's guest episode because we have someone very cool on. Ngozi Ukazu is the creator of the hugely popular webcomic Check Please, which is a New York Times bestseller. She's won a Harvey and an Ignatz Award, and she's nominated for an Eisner this year. Beyond being an exceptional comic book artist, she's also extremely invested in fan works and transformative fiction, which means that scattered online amongst her wonderful and long-running comic, there are also some hidden gems dedicated to a number of different pieces of media. So who better to talk to about online fan culture than someone who both creates for fandom and built their own? Excitingly for me, she's also the first guest we've had on this podcast who hasn't already spent an inordinate amount of time listening to me yell about pop culture in the pub, which means she's still under the very charming illusion that my opinions are at all well thought out. But we'll see if we can't sort that out in a second. I'm Alex.
I'm Ngozi.
This is Pop Culture Boner, the podcast edition, and today we're thinking about fandoms. Welcome, Ngozi.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. So I've given everyone a bit of an intro to what you do, but for those of the audience who haven't read Check Please, can you let them know what's up?
Yeah, so Check Please is a webcomic, which you can read online. It follows Eric Bitty Biddle, who is a former figure skater who joins a college hockey team and loves to bake. His biggest thing is that he's afraid of getting checked, which is in hockey when you basically get tackled. And it's also this very happy ending LGBTQ love story. So you take college, you take gay romance, you take sports, you take baking, all things that to other people seem completely disparate, but for whatever reason in my mind seem to go together very well. And then you put it online in a bunch of little strips, and slowly people decide they want to read it and are invested in the characters and their outcomes. And yeah, that's how Check Please came to be.
So you post Check Please on Tumblr, which I think is fascinating because Tumblr is like the least monetizable website known to man.
Yes, that's a really good observation. Tumblr is a place where people kind of just share ideas, and there's not really a clear way to monetize a joke that you put on Tumblr. And a lot of that is because when you post something to Tumblr, anyone can reblog it and kind of claim it for their own on their own blog. So when I'm posting Check Please, my main thing was, okay, I can't really, put ads on this. I'm not really going to monetize it directly, but I can get fan engagement. And the best part of sharing that comic on Tumblr was that as soon as you put it online, people share it and they kind of become ambassadors for the comic. As soon as they share it, they're saying like, hey, I like this. It's on my blog now. Maybe you should read it.
And you did develop like a huge online following out of that.
Yeah, I would say so. It was surprising the first time, like I saw, and the thing, we're already getting into the conversation. The first time I saw fan fiction for Check Please, I was like astounded that anybody was thinking about these characters after they closed their browser window or put down their phone. And from there, it just kept growing and growing and growing as more people started sharing the comic with their friends.
Yeah, so I want to start off with maybe talking about your interactions with fandom, because earlier you mentioned the themes for Check Please seem disparate, but I think when I look at them, I see a fan pulling themes from sort of almost like AU fan fiction.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got baking, we've got romance, we've got college, we've got sports. Yeah. Like it's all kind of pulling from different places, I think, that really lend themselves to that kind of fandom. You're a hockey fan, right?
Yeah, I would say I'm a hockey fan, sports fan. I love sports because I used to play sports in high school, but in general, like sports is like I love sports because athletes are characters and I love following their journeys.
Yeah.
We could definitely talk about real person fiction, which was also very prevalent and very popular when Check Please was getting started. So real person fiction for hockey specifically.
I'm fascinated by this, like the idea of going down a rabbit hole on like real person fiction for hockey players, because I got excited the other day while I was trying to research for this podcast because I thought I'd found an academic paper on Tom Brady fan fiction.
What?
But actually it was about Tom Brady and evangelism. And I was like, this is not what I wanted.
Oh, that's the opposite.
Tell me about people writing Tom Brady fucking, or don't tell me anything.
Who are the freaks writing Tom Brady fan fiction?
Right? I want to know about those guys.
I desperately invested in those guys.
Yeah. And so what was your first sort of online fandom experience like?
Okay, it was around 12 or 13, middle school, when I was watching all this anime on Kids WB. It was the afternoon block of anime and American cartoons that were shown after school, and so I was probably just watching a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh. I think there's a certain time in every kid's life or every creatively interested person's life where they get so invested in something and get so interested in something that they can't, it's not just the stuff that you talk about on the playground or at lunch. You start thinking like, is anybody else out there as obsessed with this thing as I am? And fortunately for us, when we were growing up, we were able to kind of do that one, like very trepidatious, scaredy, like Google search of like Yu-Gi-Oh cool, and something pops up where other people are like, yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh cool, or Naruto cool, and you're like, oh my god, other people think this thing is as cool as I think it is. And that's how it started for me. I logged online, and after the dial-up stopped screeching, I would type in like Seto Kaiba cool, Yu-Gi-Oh cool. And there were forums where people were like, yeah, I think Seto Kaiba is really, really cool. And that's how it started. Seeing other people get excited for these fictional characters, I was like, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I am crazy. I'm crazy with other people.
Yeah, other people are doing it. I think that's one of the things that's actually interesting about the way that fan culture has evolved, has been the death of some of those forums, which is so sad. But like, it's sad, but I feel like when a lot of that stuff moved, because my online experience, I think, is probably a little bit different from yours, but I feel like when a lot of that stuff moved to Tumblr, like Tumblr is a garbage fire, but it did at least allow that very specific type of collaboration that was just like latch onto this thing and add your own thing to it.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I don't know how much of nostalgia or memory being kind of hazy is making me glorify those forum days, because I know I was 13, 14, 15. How I'm imagining these like beautiful screeds and like these beautiful odes to characters, when in reality it's probably just like carrot underscore carrot, like heart. Like, I love these characters, but in my mind it was just like people waxing just so poetic about.
Well, where else were you going to put all of those feelings, you know?
Yeah, like, where could you put all those emojis? But yeah, I think when Tumblr came into it, we kind of, well, in between like those random forums and then Tumblr, there was LiveJournal, which was still in my mind probably some of the like my happiest fandom moments, because it felt that was probably as much of a cohesive community as I had ever experienced in my fandom days. And when I was on LiveJournal, my two primary fandoms were Avatar: The Last Airbender and Star Trek. The 2009 movie was, like, by and large, one of my most defining fandom experiences. And that was completely on LiveJournal. And it just felt that there were like maybe 2 or 3 communities that you had to join to gain access to the posts. I had people who I was following, and like my friends list, I could sort by people who were in the same fandom. And it felt a little bit more cohesive as a community, because Tumblr, if someone put something out there, it could like fly off anywhere.
It's just chaos.
Yeah. And so I think it was a place where I felt like other people got it, and we were all kind of working towards the same goal of just being nuts about Star Trek.
So what, aside from being nuts together, which we've determined is an extremely core part of being a fan of anything, what else about that particular like Star Trek section made it so ideal for you? Because I know when we were talking about this prior, you said there were 2 fandoms that were ideal experiences for you. There was Star Trek in like 08, 09.
Yeah.
And then the other one you mentioned is a recent one, which is The Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I never thought I'd be a Star Wars person. And I honestly still to this day do not think I'm a Star Wars fan. And I'm not even a Mandalorian.
You just like these 2 characters.
Yeah, I'm not even a Mandalorian fan. I am a Din Luke fan. And it's like if anybody asks me any questions about Star Wars, it's like, I'm sorry, I don't go here. I'm only invested for this basically fanon at this point, for these 2 characters, Luke Skywalker and Din Djarin. But that initial fan experience, I remember the fan fiction was so good, and the fan art was better. Everything was better back in the day. Make fandom great again. I'm just kidding. I'm not.
We'll get you a little red cap.
Yeah.
This is your running platform.
Oh my God. No, it was this moment of, I think that like it was kind of all about the humor as well. They were like starting to develop all these inside jokes. We were teaching each other about Star Trek as we discovered Star Trek together. And I guess I kept like underscoring this idea of togetherness. Like we were kind of all, I think that's one of the best things about fandom, when you're consuming something, but you feel like you're consuming and processing it with other people. So it was people who were my age for the first time, like learning about, going back to watch the original series and making jokes about Spock together, like, and all of us starting to build this vocabulary around these characters and learn about the world building. In fact, one of my really good friends today, we met probably in like 2016, 2017, but we realized that we were in the same fandom together, which was Star Trek. And that person is Julia Barretts, who is the creator of Pillow Fort. Which,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And her entire thing was this, again, this nostalgia to get back into kind of those, how do you pronounce the word? Halcyon days. Halcyon days of like when everything was kind of glowing, and fandom was about doing things together, discovering things together, going into fandom wank together, and kind of having a little bit more control over who was in your group and who was out of your group, who had the same fandom goals as you.
See, that's, I think, is quite funny, because now you have a much bigger following online, and every now and then I see just a little bit of what I like to call sexy and unhinged posts come through from you, which are these just like very gentle ones where they're like, I think I was just like scrolling through your like Twitter thing, and like this post came up from you that was like, well, obviously Mobius and Loki are in love. And I was like, oh yeah, duh. 100%. And then just like kept scrolling. And like around the same time, I had literally posted a tweet that was like, it was when everyone was like, oh my God, Loki is canonically bisexual now. And I was like, look, at this point, unless he's raw dogging Owen Wilson on a dying moon, I don't care. And then I think I scrolled a little bit and I saw you like drawing something about it. And I was like, yep, okay, I'm on the same page. This is a sexy and unhinged thing that we've done, and I like it.
Yeah, and oh my God, Marvel fandom. It's so funny. We could even get critical already, but like Marvel fandom has not been an ideal fandom.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah, I mean, for so many reasons. I think a lot of what makes a fandom ideal is also the content's relationship with the audience and kind of maybe the distance or respect that the audience and fandom has between the content.
Mm.
I think that like when I start to move into maybe the sexy and unhinged area, it's kind of me making a bold, like ludicrous claim and just saying like these are my rules. This is how I am choosing to engage with this content. So maybe we can look at it this way. I think I was really big into fandom in high school. Then college hit and there was a big lull as I don't know, had to study or whatever. And then my mind couldn't keep away from that necessity to consume and then have a post-consumption process, my post-consumption process is fandom.
Yeah.
And then I think that is why I created Check Please. Check Please for me was this way to engage with fandom, but also create for myself.
Yeah.
I always said that like I was the first fan of Check Please because I was making the content and I knew that I had main content, like and main storyline. But in my mind, I wanted to make fan fiction. I wanted to write fan art, and I wanted to even have like other fan content around this main content. Which is it's a weird way to approach your own work, knowing that you're making like non-canonical content for your work. And I think that was a 7-year period. And then when I stopped Check Please, that's pretty much when the pandemic started. Like the last my book, the second volume of Check Please came out right when the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And so that's when I kind of ran out of fandom. I had been making this little garden and eating from it. And then I realized, and then a famine happened. So I had to start outsourcing. So that's when I started to return to all my fandoms from high school. So right now I'm working on another graphic novel, which is not, it is not a content. The content is not a source for fandom. It's not fandom specific because like the stuff that you said, like baking, college, sports, that's all like really fertile ground for fandom. The work I'm making right now is like about like self-loathing and trauma and socioeconomic commentary, which is not really a fandom source.
You don't believe the socioeconomic fandom is really going to hook into this one? I think there could be a through line here.
I mean, that's another thing to talk about. Like so let's be real. Check Please is about 2 cis white men who are young, attractive, able-bodied, and that is fandom catnip. I don't care what anybody says. Like, oh well, one of my orcs is purple. It's like so sorry. like I know there's a lot to fandom. There's like WLW fandom, Fem/, there's people like shipping all sorts of gender identities, but we cannot deny that if you want your fandom to be quote unquote big, you cast 2 white cis able-bodied men and people will gravitate towards it. And I didn't do that for Check Please on purpose, but
but boy did it work.
Yeah, and I under like it'd be naive of me to say that was not part of Check Please's popularity.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's probably a good segue into like less than ideal fandom experiences then. Yeah. If we're talking about the kind of politics that come with what makes stuff popular and people engage with it and produce fan art and headcanons and all that sort of thing, we know that at a particular point, fandom can become unbearable.
Yeah.
At what point do you think that kind of tipping point is?
So the big rule for me is that fandom is personal. It is individual. It's extremely individualistic. And that when you make fandom, you make it for yourself and your friends, and you should ignore anything that goes against that. When fandom becomes less than ideal, it's usually when people's behavior strays away from those quote unquote rules, where you are suddenly looking at, you're looking at other people's papers, like in class, like you're looking to see what other people are doing. You're upset that people aren't making content that you want. It usually goes back to control, when you try to control other people. And this usually comes in the form of, like, these people are doing something wrong, so I'm going to tell them to stop, or the content creator or the content source is doing something wrong, and we as a fan are going to tell them to stop. That friction that comes from trying to control other people's creative pursuits, no matter how creatively empty they are or how morally wrong they are, that attempt to control is usually when fandom starts to go sour. And so we can sit here and argue whether or not it's anyone's responsibility to call out moral wrongs in fandom, but I can tell you for sure that is not a good fandom experience. People start to do that.
Definitely. Have you experienced, I think one of the things that I find really interesting about you having created essentially your own fandom, like you made something and you engaged with it in the way that a fan would. I think because you are so accessible within that work, I'm always interested in how people interact with you in that way. Because sometimes I go into your Twitter replies and I see some insane things that have been said to you. And I'm like, who talks to people this way?
Yeah. I know that for me, it was a learning curve. I think in the first years of making Check Please, there were moments when I broke my own rule, where I tried to direct fans in a certain way. And that was because I think the comic was still small enough to where I felt like it was just mine. And seeing other people's interpretations felt like almost like a revision or a suggestion. As the comic got bigger and the audience got bigger, I started to realize, oh no, this is just fandom and fandom rules apply. Therefore, if someone makes fan fiction about Biddy being an alien from space and he and Jack fall in love on Mars, that's actually pretty cool. That's fine. Yeah. But the rule, what I've learned is that it goes both ways. Not only can I not tell any fan what to do with my work ever, short of copyright infringement, fans can't tell me what to do. That and I think that learning that and learning how to behave as a creator helped me really helped me going forward as the comic grew. Because the worst experiences early on were where there was that lack of clarity, where people thought that they could tell me what to do or message me like, is this going to happen? Is this wrong? Or when I, would make any type of subtweet about what I don't know, what fans are doing. I didn't subtweet, but yeah, people can play in the sandbox, but it's still my sand. Yes. and I can't tell them what to build. They can build a giant dick in the sand, but it's still my sand. I can't tell them what to build.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting in terms of the kind of economics of it, though, because there's been this kind of push where, as a small creator, you're sort of it's your sand, people are playing in it, but you're much closer to the people that are playing in your sand. Yeah. Whereas I think this is like maybe the third, possibly the fourth episode of this season where I am going to talk about Supernatural, but it's one of those things that you just have to fucking talk about because it was so enormous. And it drew from fan works really consistently. So there are episodes that are dedicated to cosplayers and fan conventions for the Winchesters, because there's a meta novel that's running as a plot line through that they used, they sourced fan works for to kind of build this extra sort of world out in it. And I think there's been this push recently in terms of like, well, what do fans want and how can we kind of incorporate it into our retellings of particularly big franchisey type things. But I feel like Supernatural is really one of the first sort of things to do it like that. So the sandbox in that case is obviously much bigger.
Yeah.
But I feel like it kind of opens this weird part through way where they're like, oh, they're paying attention to us. And so we can drive the content in this way, which might not be so bad for something huge, but obviously has a really significant impact on smaller creators like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've I've kind of done those little meta nods to fans in my own work. There's a comic where they're trying to find a new hockey manager, and one of the people who auditions is a huge fan of Jack Zimmerman, and they're like, "Oh my god, I don't even go to this college, but I would love to be the manager of the team." and they're wearing like a hockey jersey. And I've encountered fans who are like big fans of Jack Zimmerman. I think that when a work decides to become meta and then point out the people who are enthusiastic about consuming the work,
yeah,
I think that can only be done with kindness and very carefully, because I antagonizing fans is kind of boring too. It's like, yeah, it's like, what's the point of making a joke about the post-consumption process that people have when engaging with entertainment? It's like, so I don't know. I think that Supernatural can get away with it because it is so huge and they told so many stories so that they can, go to every single nook and cranny of their universe and storytelling. But for a smaller creator, like, you have to be really careful, because I think part of respecting fans, and what I love to see from the authors that tell stories, or the media corporations who make stories, is that respect for readers and their readers and viewers and their interpretation. It's really careful. It's like a very careful dance that the people who create stories and people who consume stories have to do with one another.
Yeah, because I feel like I've also seen a lot of particularly there's something about children's media and the internet that's just broken.
Oh yeah.
And I think you sent me an article called Gift Logic, Labors of Love Flourish Online Under Fandoms by Casey Feisler, which is talking about kind of the broader economic push and pull of fandom, particularly in relation to 50 Shades of Grey and how it kind of broke the rules here. And so for people who aren't necessarily familiar with fan communities as much, fandom is very heavily sort of in terms of what you were saying before, really heavily gift economy based. So it's a community, you're putting things into the community and also taking from it as well.
Yeah.
And it's an exchange, and it's very important, like acknowledgement and accreditation is really important as part of that. And 50 Shades started as a fan work, but then made basquillions of dollars, and a lot of fans in that Twilight community were really upset because that push and pull of like gifting and taking had been exploited by one person.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the way that, like, I feel like a lot of this sort of gifting economy and this sort of compulsion towards really positive experiences within fandom. So like the idea of, there's a line in that article where they were talking about like positive feedback loops on works. And I was kind of thinking about that in terms of the way that people seem to interact with particular pieces of content, largely children's media, I find, or like young adult novels, where it's like, if a character has a negative experience, there seems to be this like wave of backlash of like, oh, you can't do that to him. And it feels like there's this bleed area almost of like fan rules and community rules spilling over into the actual content output. Does that make sense?
And so you're saying that maybe fans of a work, like, fans usually have a tendency to be positive and to be enthusiastic. so that when they consume something that might have a character experiencing something negative, they want to enforce those like fandom rules.
There seems to be this like overspill of fandom rules into like particular types of media, where I've seen like, I think maybe Steven Universe was a big one, where like a character would have a negative experience and then there would be suddenly this wave of pushback from usually adult fans.
Really?
Yeah, and then the accessibility of the creators online seemed to be another driving force with it, where they would all at them in the tweets.
I'm not sure if that is something that comes from fandom culture and shit. I don't think positivity, like enforcing positivity, comes from fandom culture. I think that is something that happens in children's, a lot of children's media or media intended for young people. There is often this idea of maybe like a moralistic kind of narrative, moralistic narratives of there being right and wrong, and also there things being complicated. And I think that as soon as something bad happens or something complicated happens in those narratives, which I applaud when complicated things happen in narratives. It's very hard for fandom, especially on the social media platforms we have today, which, forgo nuance, to respond with the nuance that is needed. So I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, because fandom tends to be positive, we're like, let's spill that positivity into our response. I think it is literally the lack of nuance, and maybe younger people who are growing up with social media platforms that don't have nuance being like, wait, this is bad or this is good. And then people taking sides, and the most angry and like reactive reactions always float to the top because that's what the algorithm wants.
Yeah. I think there is also like an interesting element of like that puritanical kind of like, oh God, won't somebody think of the children?
Oh yeah.
Which I think is so interesting, because it's almost like, unless it's this like Degrassi-esque moralizing where it's like, she used the internet once and now she's got a G-string and she's smoking a joint, kind of like, unless it's this really like moralistic kind of thing, then they can't have a gray area type experience with the world.
Yeah. And so there's two ways to approach fandom, right? There's transformative fandom and curative fandom. And I think in between is the type of fandom experience that you're speaking to, which would be a critical fandom, where we talk about even the moral implications, the philosophical implications, the gray areas, where we're both like making our observations and critiquing. So curative fandom is fandom that's all about data collection, information sharing. It's talking about the model of X-Wing in Star Wars. It's talking about the different Enterprise ships or the uniforms in Star Trek. It's all about like just hooking into this thing that you love by just learning more about the world and the actual building blocks of it. Transformative fandom is not necessarily opposite, but it's taking this thing that you love and tweaking it so that there's more representation, more queerness, more people of color, putting it in the coffee shop AU. That's where fan art and fan fiction come into. And I do think that in between there is room for maybe we actually don't have that right now because of the nature of the social media platforms accessible to us. But in between is this space for fandom, or maybe we can call it, I don't know, critical fandom, critical engagement with fandom, where we're talking about, we had everything memorized about this episode of Star Trek. And also we want to give our like critical analysis, which is kind of building off what we know. And it gets to like a bunch of gray areas, like, okay, so this character got on the internet, but they got a G-string, but they didn't start smoking, but they also started doing bad things and good things. And having a space to discuss that kind of doesn't exist right now. There's a space, there's clear spaces for transformative fandom, Tumblr, kind of Twitter, and there's kind of clear spaces for curative fandom. I think that's more the convention spaces where people are literally going like, here's my cosplay, I'm gonna buy this model of the Enterprise. But I don't think anymore, and I think it's kind of a really sad thing that there's not space for critical, complex discussion of fandom. I think that maybe is what we lost with the forums. While I was on the forums making a bunch of emojis, there were people on the forums actually being like, I disagree with this. I think this character is doing this. Because you can't necessarily have those conversations on Tumblr anymore because they can get co-opted and transformed and
and there's always with Tumblr the risk that it will run away in 19 different directions. You can't keep up with all of them. I think a lot of that critical fandom space, those people just went on to get English degrees and have PhDs now. I think that might be where they go. But in terms of what I thought was really interesting while I was reading some academic writing on fan cultures was this very weird anthropological kind of look at it from the outside with a magnifying glass, and watch as the Star Trek fans emerge from behind the fridge and move to their watering hole kind of thing. And then, but it's the actual participation in fandom is much different. And having that kind of critical discussion in fandom, you have it with your friends, I think, maybe, but it's very hard to have in a public forum.
So it's probably harder for these academics to comment on because you have it in the hub, you shout about it, but you don't really necessarily always write about it on.
Because you will get, your head bitten off.
Interesting. That's actually, I think we might have stumbled upon something really interesting, that this kind of missing part of fandom, which is the nuanced critical takes, they're kind of happening vocally and in person because it is risky to have those conversations online. Interesting.
I think they are also happening on YouTube. I think that's a platform and podcasts, but it's still it's mostly a one-way medium. People, if they're responding to it, they may not see the response. The comments are generally a dumpster fire. That space exists, but it's not quite.
That is a really good point.
Useful.
Yeah, I think YouTube is an interesting one because I sometimes will, when I'm writing about a film or something, I will sometimes go down a little critical YouTube rabbit hole just to see what's up. And it is an interesting mix of weird, particularly film type ones. There's a lot, you get a lot of that curative fandom of well, as we know, David Lynch has done and also and when the eyeball appears in David Lynch's films, it means that kind of thing, or weird facts about behind the scenes things.
10 things you missed in the Star Trek Discovery trailer.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So exactly what Wes is saying. There is a space for that, but unlike the other spaces that we've kind of specified, it's one way. Transformative fandom is all about it's just yes anding, and then curative fandom is oh my god, you got that cool toy, well I got this one, and oh, where'd you get that, how did you build this? But it seems like the only space for critical fandom is just going one direction, and no one's reading the comments, no one's actually having a fruitful conversation.
Oh no, people come in with a fully formed opinion. And the other thing that I found was quite interesting was particularly when I was writing about Jennifer's Body. So Jennifer's Body, hundreds of people have an opinion on how that film got royally fucked over by its general release and whatever. And you can read there's a bunch of Vox articles about it. I think there's a few Vulture articles about it. BuzzFeed's done one. And a lot of the kind of commentary on that was appearing on YouTube was sort of strange rehashings of this told in a sort of fun way from someone who was maybe not a journalist, or maybe, was a fan of Megan Fox or, Diablo Cody or whatever. So that it was there was this like critical space there, but it was very much pulling from existing criticism elsewhere, which I thought was quite interesting. It didn't seem to be a fully fleshed out, like, because I think a lot of the time with those types of media, like you're just like, I don't know why the reviews for this movie were so bad. Like, I liked it, you know, and you sort of internalize that and off you go kind of thing. So it seems like there's this gap between those two things as well, which I think is quite weird.
I guess I did want to go back to, because I don't think I fully closed the parentheses on why Star Trek was such a good fan experience, and then why my most recent fan experiences have been pretty good.
Yes, please. I want to close both of those parentheses because I think I just was like, you're sexy and unhinged now. Anyway.
And there's also another parentheses on like, I think about like, for like one thing that I've learned about my most recent work, which is about a black girl, a poor black girl going to like, goes to like a rich private school, and she switches bodies with the most popular white boy in school. Like one reason why that is not a fandom, like that's not going to be conducive to like a million fan fiction, is because Black female protagonist, and I really want someone to try to argue with me on that. Like, show me the fandoms that are just chock full of the AO3 tag is chock full of black girls. Anybody? Bueller? No? Okay.
Tumbleweed.
Yeah, I think this is a tumbleweed. There's the only white male character in the comic is the kind of like that dude Ragnus, that boy that she flips with. And he does have a best friend, but he's an Asian male. So like, I think psychologically, my mind was like, you cannot build this for fandom. So all the tenets that you like kind of put out there, which, and again, I'm not saying that people are going out there like making their like white boy or even like white cis girl comics to make fandom, but I know like we all know why these things are like quote unquote like fertile fandom. Yeah,
the structures are overwhelmingly apparent, even if everyone's like, no, it's fine.
No, it's not. That's not what happens.
I also enjoyed Black Panther.
It's like, yeah, I made fan art of T'Challa and Killmonger. Yeah, I'm not rich. Okay, so where's all the Lupita Nyong'o fan art of her making out with the Nicoya?
It's. I think you'll find it's just Michael B. Jordan.
It's really
yeah.
But so anyway, but like the reason, so I'm in that zone of my mind where that's my primary like professional work. So the ironic thing is I made that so that there kind of would not be a fandom space around that. But because I know that my mind constantly needs a fandom space, that's why I have been returning to all these different fandom spaces. So I started going, so it's kind of like, it's a, like, I'm kind of calling myself out as like, I'm not going to write fan fiction of these characters, like making out. Like, I don't want to do that. So I guess I'll have to return to Jeeves and Wooster fandom. I guess I have to start watching all these MCU TV shows coming out and all these Disney properties. And I think that is why like my mind started searching. And also they're teenagers, and yeah, you can make fan art and fan fiction about teenagers, but these characters are too close to me personally. Like they draw from my personal experiences. I don't think I can make all the sexy unhinged stuff that I can do for Owen Wilson and Loki or Din Djarin and Luke Skywalker. So
you got to put the sexy and unhinged somewhere.
And I think that's why I did that with most recently the Mandalorian fandom, because again, I'm not a Star Wars fan, and I'm not a Star Wars fan, and I've never really been like a huge like space cowboy fan, but for whatever reason, when someone made that GIF set of Luke Skywalker like utterly destroying a bunch of droids to, yeah, Toxic by Britney Spears. And then the Mandalorian looks at him. I'm like, cool, I'm ready. I know what I'm doing for the next 2 months. And it's drawing fan art of those two guys having fun, being nice to each other.
Just having a nice time.
Just having a very nice time.
And nothing more.
So, and that was a really good fandom experience, because I think that we were so, like, everyone who decided to get on the Din Luke boat and go to Din Luke Island, we were like, we're off the mainland. No one can find us here. We make our own rules. And the price for admission is that you have to be as stupid and weird as the rest of us. Like, and that's it. Like, no one could come in and be like, hey, I'm a Star Wars fan. What the hell's going on here? You can't even you can't find the island unless you're crazy. So no one found us. And it was just this little Darwinian experiment. I don't know what I'm saying. The metaphor is gone off the rails.
There's only so many boat-related, island-related.
I don't know. So I think that was really fun, because there wasn't a larger fandom to impose rules, because I think that happens sometimes with, like, I mean, I don't even know what a big fandom is right now, but, like, that didn't happen. And I think the other part was, I think in order to be in that fandom, you just had to really want those two characters to be together. It was a fandom for a ship and not a fandom for a show. And I think that already, like, again, it kind of, like, filters out people who are antis or pro shippers or whatever the hell that means. Again, the price of admission is you had to be crazy to think the ship would work, and then you just have to love the ship. And I think the third thing that really made it good is that not only that was everyone had the same goal, which is just these characters are going to be in love and they're going to have a little green baby. Even in AU fan fiction that's set on Earth, the baby's going to be green.
Well, I started watching Mandalorian and I was like, this is a show about a man who wants a baby.
Yep. Yeah. And it's so, again, if you like The Mandalorian and you watch the whole thing, again, another price for admission, you got to
love that little green baby.
You have to love the little green baby. So, like, I think what makes this fandom ideal, because I talked about in the Star Trek fandom that what worked is that everyone had the same goals. In this fandom, everyone had the same goals just by process of elimination. If you made it, exactly. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's it. And then once everyone was filtered out, so it's only left. Like, the only people left were the people who just wanted the same thing. Then we could do all the, like, enthusiasm. Then there can be those positive feedback loops. Then there can be the yes and of, here, I drew fan art. Oh, I made fan fiction based off your fan art. Oh, I made a sketch based off your fan fiction. And that was something I have not experienced since high school with Star Trek.
Yeah. I think, what was the post that you sent me that you were like, this is ideal?
It was actually for Spider-Verse.
Yeah. But it starts off with a funny little comic, and then it's very much like digital theater sports. It's full yes and expanded as just, like, people add to it with their own ideas.
I mean, the funny thing is that artist is actually someone I discovered through the Mandalorian. And let's just be real, it's the Din Luke fandom. It is the Din Djarin's Luke Skywalker fandom. It's not the Mandalorian fandom. It's not Star Wars fandom.
We want to be absolutely clear. Ngozi does not give a fuck about the Mandalorian.
I actually really like the Mandalorian. I do not care about Star Wars. I'm so sorry. I'm not sorry. But the artist they go by Rebecca Pen Scratches, but I found them via the Din Luke fandom, and then in a completely different Discord, someone posted this thread, which I believe just starts off with Miles saying that, like, Peter Parker is dating his uncle Aaron, and then again, like, digital theater sports, people just saying, like, yes and this happened, yes and this happened, yes and this, to the point where you get this 300,000 note thread of people just being excited about this one prospect and then going back and forth on it. And I'm like, that feels so good to see, It's
Yeah.
it's no one saying no, you can't do that, or ew, that's wrong, or it's just people saying we all saw Spider-Verse. We all think it'd be great if Uncle Aaron and Peter Parker were gay together, even on accident, as something that Miles suggested, and just like, yes, yes, yes. And everyone just banging on the lunch table chanting.
It is quite a charming experience. I think the reverse of that, where it becomes like it goes from sexy and unhinged to just unhinged, is something like the
That's also good.
I mean, that is also good. A big fan of Unhinged, but the Onceler incident.
Oh Lord! Oh God! Sorry, I sound like I just got shot.
I know. I'm just. I'm like, do you remember Tumblr in 2012? Ngozi? Like,
I will just say that a mutual person that we know sat me down for 30 minutes to tell me about the Onceler, because I had avoided that. I was like trying to get out of college.
For those of you who aren't aware, the Onceler is a character in the Lorax, where you might remember the Lorax of Dr. Seuss. They made a movie of the Lorax, and because there was no one to sort of ship within it, the Onceler ended up being shipped with the Onceler in an endless feedback loop of Oncelerdom. And Ngozi's and my mutual friend is deeply passionate about only the worst online experiences. And so I also got the same 30-minute lecture where I was like, no, I don't want to know about it.
I don't want to know about the Onceler. Yeah, and that was something where, like, again, fandom needs, it's like, again, and I'm making a huge generalization because there's tons of fan pairings that are featured trans people and genderqueer people and women and people of color. But fandom was like, ooh, I see what appears to be a cis white thing. And we're like, let's just make it work. And they just got their action figures and just started banging it together. God. I mean, but the thing is, like, even though that is like truly unhinged and dark, it's still fandom, baby. It's still good in a way.
It's still good. Someone's having a great time.
Okay, so maybe we can even just say that fandom is at its most ideal when it's some mixture of sexy and unhinged. When you get, maybe we can, here, look, we can co-author this paper. It's called the Onceler Spectrum. Where it's this range of sexy to unhinged, where I think at one end is Onceler, which is 0 sexy, 100% unhinged. And I have no idea what's at the other end, which is just 100% sexy, 0% unhinged. That's impossible.
I think that's when you just take two himbos from somewhere.
Supernatural?
Is it not just porn parody?
Porn parody.
Supernatural porn parody to the Onceler Spectrum. No,
we're aiming for the middle, and this is how we get our PhD in Ngozi. This is how we get it together.
Yes. We have to share it. I'll get the PH. You get the anyway. So I think so. Okay, but I think the opposite of sexy and unhinged is puritanical and by the books, which is, again, I can't tell anybody in fandom what to do, but I think that when people are like, this has to be canonical and this has to be morally like sound or morally correct, that's when you get into, that's not what fandom's about. I don't think that's what fandom's about.
I don't think that's what fandom's about. I also just wonder like what you do in that space. Like, what are you adding to it? Like,
it's the police. That's what you're doing. Sorry, podcasts are famously a visual medium. I'm holding up my fingers like, and I just knocked on a door.
I kicked the door in. Stay tuned for our upcoming police procedural.
Where do we end up with, like, say, Star Wars fandom? Like, the toxic side of the Star Wars fandom post The Last Jedi. And then that feeds back to the creators, and then they capitulate and create the absolute steaming pile of shit that was episode 9.
Justice for John Boyega.
Where does that fit on the scale? Is that in that puritanical, canonical sort of like by the book?
It's funny because I think with that, I mean, that was kind of like a corporate failure. I know J.J. Abrams is now famously on the books for having said, if we had planned this, it would have been good. It was just like, I think that I do think that that is born of a lack of separation between, I think that's a really good observation, because if there hadn't have been that toxic feedback loop, I do think that Finn as a character would probably have a really great story arc. But what happened was that it was, I think, going into like canonical and puritanical, you know what? I think maybe the actual, like, the spectrum has another axis. And I think it's maybe just like any type of heteronormativity, patriarchy, like racism that kind of insidiously seeps its way into making fandoms close to canon, or saying that they can't represent certain things or they have to be a certain way. I do think that fandom toxicity kind of sometimes comes from those sources. Like people kind of Trojan horsing all of these phobias and power structures through canonicity in order to make claims.
Yeah, I think that was definitely what happened with that, was that we almost had John Boyega with a beautiful, big central story arc, and a bunch of nerds lost their minds. And it was just like, no.
And then even for a character like Rey, I mean, a character like Rose is a great example of a character who probably would have had a bigger part in other movies if it hadn't been for the negative feedback of fans. I don't know. I think that no matter it being the creator or the consumer, whoever is doing it in the most like diverse, queer, weird way, they're winning. And whoever is doing it in the most like puritanical, like canonical way, the least indulgent way, they're losing. So, but no matter what, whoever's winning or losing, I don't think that there should be an interaction, or like you can critique, but you can't tell the other person what to do.
Yeah. All of these people are allowed to do what they like. Some of them are just wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it kind of maybe going back to when fandom is at its least ideal, I really do think it's when people are trying to get control. And I mean, we can go into dangerous territory, because usually when people talk about, like, if I were to say like anybody in fandom should do anything that they want, people would say like, well, does that mean that you can post disgusting pictures or you can hurt other people? And I'm like, actually, it kind of does. It means that you have to, actually people can do anything that they want on the internet. And you have the responsibility to have you and your friends not interact with that. And you can shun the other person that you don't like. But unfortunately, they can do whatever they want, which is not something that I think people like to hear, because it's this idea of like, well, there are things that are bad that I don't have control over. There are things that are bad that you don't have control over, but you don't have to endorse. You can endorse good things and make those things like rise to the top.
Yeah. I think I keep getting recommended like anime people tweets. And I don't anime. So I'm constantly just like, what's going on here? But it's just people screaming that like, that's a teenager and you can't do that with a teenager. And I'm always just like, I don't know why you're wasting your energy, bub. You know, like.
And like, the thing is, I also want to respect anyone who wants to do good. Like they genuinely believe that what they're doing is correct. Yeah. I also suspect that a lot of people just want to exercise some amount of control, but you can't call people out for that, because there's no honest discussion to be had. Like, so you got fired from your job, or you're a teenager in high school with shitty parents, or you have like you may not be making as much money as you want. So therefore I think that you're leading this witch hunt and this puritanical hunt, but you can't have that discussion with people. Those are discussions people can only have with themselves. And so
I always just find it fascinating because I can't think of anything worse than sticking my toe into the bear trap of having an online argument with somebody, you know?
Yeah, it's something I avoid. I've tried to avoid for a really long time. I don't think I've done it in years at this point.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the last time I argued with someone online, and it's not coming to me.
So I think that's when fandom, again, is at its worst. Like online, like I kind of keep saying that fandom is about like, you know, enthusiasm, people pounding on the lunch table, people being like, yeah, this is weird. And fandom is at its worst when people are arguing. Like, I think there's something about arguing about the content, which is kind of fine, but arguing about what people can or cannot do in fandom is absolutely not the point of it. At that point, don't even say you're in the fandom. Your fandom is morality.
Yeah.
And I have a few crusaders you can speak to. I don't know anything about crusades.
I was going to let you run with it.
I don't know anything. What were they even doing? They were just murdering people.
Arguing. It was the Bible fandom. They were up in arms, you know.
See what happened there? Bible fandom. Anyway, as someone who has participated in fandom her whole life and who has accidentally created a fandom, I think that what I've seen in my own experiences is that when fandom is at its best, it's really about connecting people, which sounds a little trite, but it's kind of profound that someone can read a book or watch a movie or like just sit with a TV show, be inspired by it, and want to see if other people have the same inspiration. I think that currently now that it has a function in society where it's kind of, for many people, it might be replacing like religious experiences. It might be replacing like local neighborhood experiences where you're connecting with people across the globe. And and maybe that is why I'm so excited about it, excited to talk about it, because it can be pretty profound and life-changing for some people.
Definitely. I think it's also, and like you maybe have a different view of it as a professional creative person, but I think for a lot of people who maybe don't have like the compulsion to maybe draw something or maybe write something without that like spark of something else to do it, when you were coming off that 9-to-5 grind and you just want to do something that is purely self-indulgent, that is also creative, it gives you that space to do it as well, you know?
Yeah. And it's funny, we're talking about something, we talk about a space, and we're talking about like almost a community, but it is really just people sharing things online, and it creates, but even you talk about you have a really hard job and you think about that fan fiction that you're going to read or that you're going to share or that you're going to comment on. And that's just like this really ephemeral space that kind of literally doesn't exist for a lot of people, because it's not, for most people, it's not a place you go to. And if you do go to that place, it's once or twice a year, or not at all during the pandemic. So maybe that's probably why it's like really important to talk about now, because we're all so isolated. To bring it back to the big global picture, there's so much isolation. So we have to enter all these like cerebral spaces and ephemeral spaces where we can connect to each other through character. That's crazy. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's like a bunch of people consuming the same character and then coming together to talk about it, because so much of online space is just screaming. Like, it's like, what else? I'm trying to think of what else I can think of that people sort of positively connect over. There's like characters and there's videos of puppies, and that's about the only positive spaces I can think of, you know?
Yeah, people and characters and ideas. And when people can connect through those things, it's like, to me, it almost becomes sacred. Like you cannot mess with that. You can't Don't make it unhorny. Don't make it unindulgent. Don't make it unfunny. Just let people go. Please, I beg.
It's going to be the tagline for this episode. Don't make it unhorny.
Yeah, which, I mean, we can just say make it horny, but I think the don't is a good imperative.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a double negative, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get a big picture. That's going to be the collage. It's going to be a picture of your head and just don't make it unhorny. Vote 1, Ngozi.
Vote for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute delight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
We've been both sexy and unhinged.
Yes.
Is there anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, I guess you guys anybody listening to this can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Tumblr, all at Ngozi, Ngoziu. And look out for my next graphic novel. If you're listening to this in 2023 or later, I have another book out, and just Google my name and you'll find it. Yeehaw.
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 I'm in Texas, I can say that.
You're allowed.